Story 1. I was burned in a house fire when the water heater exploded and became a flamethrower. I suffered burns over 90% of my lower body. 70% of that was burned to the muscle with no skin left. The cleansing bath of 1 bottle of betadine and 1 pound of salt in a whirlpool was a nightmare. I spent 4 to 5 months in the hospital and another 2 years in rehabilitation. I was 12 years old. Story 2. I was a victim of medical malpractice. I was 15 years old, held down on a table by nurses and my oncologist while he performed a bone marrow biopsy on me. Awake and without any sedative or numbing medication. He is currently rotting in prison and will hopefully be there for the rest of his life. His name is Dr. Farid Fata. He was arrested in 2012 or 2013. Story 3. A toothache made me contemplate suicide. I also had an ectopic pregnancy that ruptured my fallopian tube, causing internal bleeding, but the toothache was worse. I am terrified it will happen again. I am sorry you are feeling this way. If you are in immediate danger or thinking of harming yourself, please contact local emergency services or a crisis hotline right now. You are not alone. Consider reaching out to a trusted person or a mental health professional. I can help find resources or a crisis line in your area if you would like. Story 4. Grief, honestly. I want to say I really appreciate everyone who commented to share their experiences. Loss is an awful thing, and I remember feeling isolated in the thickness of my grief. It is comforting, even now, years later, to connect with people from around the world who have felt as I have. Thank you for that. Story 5. Watching my mother go through dementia and lose a part of herself each month is a horrible process. It is painful to see someone you love have their mind slowly deteriorate. Story 6. Having to hear your mother scream and cry out he is gone over the phone while talking about your eldest brother's passing. I swear some nights I can still hear the way she said he is gone, the break in her voice and how it shook. Story 7. For me, number 1 is kidney stones, number 2 is an infected tooth root, and number 3 is spinal stenosis. Story 8. Shingles took my breath away. I had endometriosis, stage 4, multiple abdominal surgeries, and 2 broken arms and a broken leg, not at the same time. It was awful. Story 9. My oldest son committed suicide. Life is altered in a way you would not wish on anyone. You must move forward and figure out how to even exist. Story 10. Emotional pain. Feeling suicidal. Dealing with constant suicidal ideation is not for the weak. It was worse when my brother found me unconscious on the shower floor with a head injury after passing out due to anorexia. I will never forgive myself for what he saw. I have been in recovery for 7 years. It has been 4 years since I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and the suicidal thoughts and self-harm have stopped. I am incredibly grateful to be alive. Story 11. The death of my infant daughter 2 weeks before Christmas in 1986. Story 12. A root canal performed without anesthesia. 10 out of 10 for pain, 2 out of 10 for overall experience. I would not recommend it. Story 13. Improper intrauterine device removal. It had moved sideways and had to be removed by a male doctor at a walk-in clinic who had no bedside manner. My body went into shock from the pain. I had never felt anything like that in my life. It was almost indescribable. Another time, a doctor accidentally pinched my cervix and the pain was equally intense. Fortunately, both events lasted only a short time. I now only see female obstetrician gynecologists. Story 14. I had abdominal pain and was told to go to the hospital to check for appendicitis. A nurse examined my abdomen and I passed a large amount of gas, which relieved the pain. I felt embarrassed. Story 15. Top 10. Tooth pain. Migraine. Surgery while awake. Migraines are awful. Story 16. A 104-degree fever and an 11-millimeter kidney stone were awful, but the worst pain was when I gave birth to my older son. My uterus felt like it had turned to mush and I lost over 2 liters of blood. My obstetrician gynecologist and 4 nurses tried to stabilize me for over 4 hours. During that time, my epidural wore off, and feeling my doctor manually scrape my placenta from my uterus was excruciating. I remember screaming, projectile vomiting, and wanting to sleep, But if I closed my eyes for a second, 3 nurses would start to shake me awake. Story 17. My last gout flare-up was severe. My foot was so sore and swollen that the slightest breeze touching it caused terrible pain. I could not sleep because the weight of a bed sheet was unbearable. Story 18. Benign pituitary macroadenoma, a large tumor pressing on my optic nerve. Story 19. Holding my mother's hand as she died, I told myself I needed to return home to get a good night's rest because the military was shipping me out early the next morning and I had to be sharp. I had endometriosis and was in so much physical pain that I vomited on myself while trying to hunch into a slightly less painful position. Story 20. Salmonella side effects. I experienced severe rectal spasms and bleeding for days. It felt like I had undergone prolonged, violent physical trauma. I would likely have died without intravenous fluids. Story 21. It was my first pregnancy. I was scheduled for an ultrasound to learn the baby's gender. A few nights before the appointment, I had a miscarriage. I still went through the birthing process. I was 18 weeks and 5 days pregnant. We left the hospital with our child in a small box. We later learned our baby would have been a boy. It was the most painful experience I have ever had, both physically and emotionally. Story 22. In my late teens, I came out of a dissociative episode while branding both of my wrists. I think breaking my hand was more painful in the moment, but 12 years later, I still wake up sweating in the middle of the night and have to ice my forearms until the burning sensation becomes manageable. Personally, I would choose instant, intense pain over constant, nagging pain. Story 23. I did not have a bowel movement for 2.5 to 3 weeks. I looked as if I were 9 months pregnant and could not move even an inch without excruciating pain. The best way I can explain it is 1. My intestines ripping and shredding, 2. Appendix combustion, or 3. Someone taking a rusted scalpel and slicing every surface, including my back. This has happened multiple times since I was about 15 or 16. I went to the hospital almost every time. I am pregnant now, and a couple of months ago it happened again. I hoped it would be the last time because normally it occurs at least once a month or once every 2 months, but this time I waited it out. It was god-awful. I was in cold sweats and lying shirtless in bed because my body was contracting subtly from the pain. It lasted about 45 minutes. Afterwards, I am normally sore for a day or two, but I would rather be sore than in long-lasting, brutal pain. Story 24. The cramps from an unmedicated copper intrauterine device were severe. If I did not take ibuprofen during the first 6 months after insertion, I would have been completely incapacitated. I have a high pain tolerance, and I cannot describe the intensity of the pain. It is the worst pain I have felt to date. Story 25. While intoxicated, I leaped off a balcony, broke my ankle in 4 places, and shattered my heel. Story 26. I had open-heart surgery when I was 7, and they had to put tubes in my chest to drain excess blood. The nurse had to come in and milk the tubes. It was genuinely awful. Story 27. I have had 4 children unmedicated, and it could never compare to the day my dog collapsed and died in front of me. She was suffering, and I did not even know it. Story 28. A wisdom tooth infection made me unable to eat, sleep, or think. It made me respect medieval people who lived through that with herbs. Story 29. I was raped when I was 17 or 18. I am not referring to physical injuries. Years of trauma still cause relapses sometimes. Story 30. I ruptured my eardrum while flying back from a business trip. My connecting flight was on the opposite side of the airport and I only had a 10-minute layover, so I missed the connection. I found a hotel for the night, but I woke with a terrible, throbbing pain in my ear that felt like someone was jamming a knitting needle into it. After I returned home the next day, the pain worsened. A couple of nights later, I could not sleep because of the constant pain. I went to the emergency room where they looked into my ear and confirmed it was ruptured. At first, they recommended a warm compress, acetaminophen, and aspirin, but that did not help. I had to return to the emergency room a second time, and they gave me a prescription for pain medication. The medication did not fully relieve the pain, and it caused headaches whenever I took it. Story 31. Physically, I was passing a kidney stone. Emotionally, I learned that my father had been arrested for solicitation of a minor. Story 32. Herniated disc between the fifth lumbar and first sacral vertebrae. I have smashed, cut, torn, and burned myself in nearly every way imaginable, and my back was so bad that I truly understand why people end their lives because of the pain. Story 33. Oh man. Losing all three of our family dogs within 9 months was devastating. They were two rescue greyhounds and a Jack Russell mix we had for 12 years. The first greyhound died of old age. The second was brutally attacked by another dog on the beach and died in pain. Our family dog had stomach cancer, which took him before we knew what was wrong. I have never seen my parents so tired and anguished. It was awful. Pet loss grief is very real. Story 34. Going to the bathroom after my cesarean section, with your abdominal muscles stitched together, is the worst. A close second is kidney stones with no medication and no surgery. Story 35. When I was a kid, I stupidly decided to climb a mountain of garbage. I jumped off it to seem brave and landed on the largest screw I had ever seen. It impaled my foot, lodging between the bones of my toes. I remember twisting it out counterclockwise just so I could hobble home. I looked in my grandma's medicine cabinet, found monkey's blood, and poured it into the wound. I wet my pants from the pain. I didn't tell anyone, and to this day I still get cramps from it and have a large scar on the top and bottom of my foot. Story 36. Gallstones and sludge buildup were so severe they were damaging my pancreas. I almost died and underwent emergency surgery while 8 months pregnant. Story 37. I watched my sick cat die in my arms, looking up at me for help. Grief felt like a hot knife through my heart. There was no escaping it. Story 38. A ruptured appendix with peritonitis is by far the most painful thing in the world. Story 39. Grief and kidney stones have been a miserable experience for both of us. I am still dealing with it. Story 40. I do not even know what happened. I am a girl, by the way. I think that is important to note. I was in the car with my mum and suddenly became nauseous. I did not tell her. It was bad. I was chewing gum, and that made it worse, so I threw it out the window. I know I should not have, but that is not the point. I then felt a stabbing pain in my lower abdomen, like a period cramp but worse than I typically get. I said nothing to my mum. The pain persisted for the next few hours, with nausea coming and going. I was not on my period and was not due for it. It was not my appendix because it was not in the right spot. It was so bad, but then it went away. I have no idea what that was about, and I have not had it again. Story 41. A German shepherd bit off my ear. I held it while my friend stood in shock. Story 42. Capsaicin cramps are a type of smooth muscle cramp in the stomach caused by eating super hot chilies. They produce waves of pain, turning the person pale and causing heavy sweating. People often assume the fetal position and rock back and forth, trying to find a position that reduces the pain. The episode can last almost an hour. Story 43. My 2 worst irritable bowel syndrome flare-ups caused constant pain for days. I did not know which position to lie in and could not eat anything proper. The first flare-up lasted 2 weeks. The second lasted a weekend. Story 44. Had anyone mentioned a pilonidal cyst? It felt like a white-hot sun at the center of my being. No position was comfortable. Thankfully, when I went to the student health clinic while I was at university, I received an immediate referral to a colorectal surgeon. He suctioned out the abscess, packed the wound, and I felt much better right away. It has not come back, thankfully. Story 45. Sciatic pain lasted a solid month, and nothing helped. I have 2 children, and I would choose childbirth over sciatic pain. Story 46. Tooth and gum pain. I needed to have a tooth removed because of an infection. It was awful. I tore my anterior cruciate ligament when I was 19. I cried for that one. My body was shocked. The pain was intense. I cannot pick which was worse. Both come to mind. Honorable mention. Heartbreak is in a whole different galaxy. Story 47. I was hit by a car as a pedestrian. I once said that getting a spinal tap while having meningitis was worse because there was no adrenaline to help me get through it. Story 48. I broke my neck in 2017. I have lived with physical pain every day since. Story 49. Mental pain and anguish, existential crisis or grief versus physical pain. Physically, it would be gallstones. I would rank the mental pain as worse. It nearly ended me. Story 50. You all have had crazy experiences. Oh my God. I remember when I was young, I was riding a scooter very fast and there was a crack in the ground. I went flying with my mouth open and hit my front teeth, which are larger than my other teeth, on the ground. It was terrible pain and my chin was injured as well. I had a 30-minute walk home. I also have cystic fibrosis, so coughing is not fun for me. Story 51. After abdominal surgery, the order for morphine never reached the nurses, so I came out of anesthesia without pain medication. I remember screaming in pain and how quickly the pain subsided once the morphine was finally administered. Story 52. Torn ligaments in the left knee. That was awful. Rib injuries were probably the other of the two worst injuries. Story 53. I had cancer on my spine when I was 13. Before the surgeries, I had to get around with a walker. To sit even somewhat comfortably anywhere, including on the couch, I had to use one of those inflatable donuts used for hemorrhoid relief. I definitely would not recommend it. Story 54. Cluster headache. I will not attempt to describe the pain. It is impossible. It was far beyond anything I expected I could experience. I am a lifelong migraine sufferer, and a cluster headache is at least 10 times worse. I have fractured my thumb, torn both of my anterior cruciate ligaments, and suffered a small second or third degree burn. Those injuries were pinpricks compared to my cluster headache episode. Overall, not recommended. Story 55. Testicular torsion. I went from a mild ache to severe pain in 10 minutes and could not even straighten up to walk. The ambulance drivers had to take me to the hospital in a seated position the whole way. Story 56. I had an infection in my lower left jawbone, which caused swelling and pressure on the roots of all the teeth in that area, essentially making me feel like I needed half a dozen root canals at once. I tell you, as someone who's been both shot in the foot and stabbed in the butt, the pain was unbearable. It was so bad I could not sleep at all for 3 days. The emergency clinic only gave me over-the-counter painkillers, which did nothing. At the end of the 3rd day, my skeleton felt like it was falling apart. I did not know how else to describe it. I truly thought I was going to die. Thankfully, a friend who works in medicine came and brought medication for nerve pain and Vicodin, a combination of hydrocodone and acetaminophen. It gave me enough relief that I was able to sleep. I believe she saved my life. A few days later, I reached my scheduled appointment and we began an intensive regimen of antibiotics and minor surgeries. Everything turned out okay. Story 57. Losing my 21-year-old baby boy to cancer and having him pass away in my arms was worse than any physical pain I could ever endure. It is a pain that no medication can ease. Story 58. I had my gallbladder removed and told the doctors that morphine does not work for me. They thought I was seeking stronger drugs and gave me morphine. I woke up feeling everything. I drifted in and out of consciousness and screamed at them for not listening. I felt sorry for the postoperative nurse who had to care for me. Story 59. I have given birth and suffered a rheumatoid flare and a corneal ulcer. All were very painful. The rheumatoid flare made me cry. Story 60. Kidney stones are painful, but nothing was worse than being hospitalized with viral meningitis. Story 61. After leaving a rehabilitation program, I became homeless and spent 2 months drinking Four Loko drinks nonstop. I would not drink water or eat. I only kept alcohol in my stomach long enough to get a buzz. One day, a stomachache developed and progressed to severe swelling of my internal organs. I could feel them inside me. Every tiny movement felt like a sunburn, and the pain was intense. At the hospital, they gave me morphine and a stronger synthetic opioid, not fentanyl, to help me get by. I have experienced severe pain before, such as when my 6th thoracic vertebra literally exploded in a car crash and when catheters were suddenly pulled out, but this was definitely worse. Story 62. I broke my leg in 5 places and dislocated my ankle. I was out hiking and misstepped. I felt my ankle snap and then slid down a hill. I was in a remote area, 40 minutes from a hospital, and the road was full of twists and turns. My boyfriend at the time was able to back the car up to the trail, and I had to drag myself to the car because there was no way I could stand. During the drive to the hospital, I felt my ankle flopping around at every turn. They took X-ray images of my leg before giving me pain medication, and I cried the whole time. It took 2 surgeries with plates and screws to fix it. I still walk with a limp. The second was 51 hours of labor, 3 failed inductions, and a cesarean section. Inductions are awful. You go from 0 to 10 quickly instead of progressing. Story 63. My math teacher in 7th grade said he was disappointed in me, and that ruined my mood for almost a month. Story 64. I am a security guard. I was shot once by a thief and lived. I blacked out from the pain a few times. It was not fun, and I do not wish it on anyone. Story 65. I have had both legs amputated, multiple compound fractures, and kidney stones. Story 66. I was grieving, but physically I was definitely getting my intrauterine device inserted. Story 67. I pushed for 36 hours, then I had to have an emergency cesarean section and felt them cutting into me. Nothing compares to losing my mother. Story 68. Having a catheter inserted and removed twice before my kidney surgery was not pleasant. The tube they placed down my throat after an intestinal blockage caused longer-lasting pain. I just wanted to pull the tube out. Story 69. Medication abortion was 10 hours of pure hell. The pain was excruciating, and I vomited 2 or 3 times. If you have the option, never choose a medication abortion. Choose an in-clinic procedure. Story 70. The coronavirus disease 2019 sucked. I called people to make sure they had my beneficiary information. I was ready to go. Story 71. I experienced an overreaction of my bone marrow to injections that stimulate white blood cell growth during cancer treatment. It was similar to some moments during childbirth. Story 72. I had kidney stones and torn cartilage in my sternum. Luckily, neither was long-lasting. The kidney stones were no longer a problem after they gave me the right medication. Morphine did nothing, and another medication they gave me also did nothing, but when they gave me Toradol, it was like someone pushed a button and turned off the pain. The cartilage healed in about a week, which I thought was miraculous given the pain I experienced during the first couple of days. I basically had to slide out of bed. Story 73. Kidney stone surgery. They inserted a scope into my urethra, broke up the stone, and placed a stent. They warned there might be discomfort when I urinate. It reminded me of the scene in Ninja Assassin when the villain pokes the hero. Story 74. Physical. Kidney stone. Emotional. Dealing with the complexity of divorce and the effect it might have on my kids. The good news is the divorce turned out to be the best thing ever, and my kids are doing great. But in the moment, it was incredibly painful. Story 75. It was my gallbladder. I literally thought I was dying. Scans did not show any stones, so the stones had either passed or the gallbladder was just irritated. Story 76. The worst pain I have ever had was when part of the bone in my knee died from osteochondritis dissecans. A piece of bone at the bottom of my femur died and remained stuck in the joint. The doctor tried to pin the piece back in place with pins that protruded from the top of the femur, and I had a cast that hung from those pins. I cried for 8 weeks. Story 77. The worst pain I have ever been in was from my anorexia. It was not just hunger or weakness. It was a constant, unbearable ache that lived in my body and my mind. I was so hungry that everything hurt, but I hated myself too much to eat. I felt dizzy, cold, and fragile all the time, and I pretended I was fine because at least I was in control. But it was not control. It was hell. My body begged me to stop, and my brain would not let me. I watched myself fade, and somehow that felt like safety even though it was slowly killing me. Every thought revolved around food, calories, guilt, and fear. It became my whole world, and it was miserable. The physical pain was constant. My heart raced, my muscles ached, my stomach twisted. The emotional pain was worse, the self-hatred, the shame, the loneliness of living inside my own head and pretending everything was okay when it was not. I wanted to be invisible and seen at the same time. I have been weight restored and fully recovered for a little over 6 months now, and I am finally starting to feel human again. Recovery hurts in its own way. It has been messy and uncomfortable, but it is a different kind of pain. It is the pain of healing instead of disappearing. That is something I never thought I would get to feel. The deepest pain I ever experienced was not a single moment. It was years of fighting myself just to stay alive. Story 78. A brain hemorrhage is right up there. That was very painful. Story 79. A twisted testicle on my 17th birthday was not easy to explain to my parents. Story 80. Intrauterine device insertion nearly made me pass out, and I burst into tears. It felt like an ice pick being jammed into me, followed by severe cramping for 24 hours. Story 81. Lidocaine resistance. It was during a dermatology procedure when I was a child. I had an inverted pore above my lip that was causing pain. I had no idea you were not supposed to feel it. I could feel the scalpel inside the skin under my lip, and all I could do was cry. My mother only found out in the past year, after I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome some time ago. She had thought I was crying because I was afraid of needles and already scared. I felt so bad. Story 82. I've been hit by a car and given birth naturally. None of it compares to dental pain. It's like a malignant worm drilling into your brain with razor-sharp teeth. You can almost feel it chewing. Story 83. We lost our daughter at 40 weeks and one day to a cord knot that tightened and cut off her oxygen. I had to deliver her knowing she had died and saw my husband cradling her lifeless body while I wailed in the delivery room, because we did not know she was a girl and our oldest daughter had wanted a sister for so long. 10 out of 10, the worst pain of my life. Story 84. Maybe less painful and more psychological, but when I was around 17 I had hell's itch from a really awful sunburn. I fell asleep on the beach in a bikini. I woke up with enough time to switch sides, though, and got a horrible sunburn. I was sweating when we got home and everything felt like sandpaper on my skin. The next morning my chest was extremely itchy. I scratched it and it wouldn't go away. Then my belly, shoulders, back, arms, legs, but became itchy, and no matter how much I scratched, it only got worse. About 2 hours after I woke up, I was screaming in my then boyfriend, now fiancé's bathroom in absolute agony because I was so itchy everywhere and couldn't relieve it. I couldn't wear clothes because my sunburn hurt, and any clothing irritated the itch even more. It was traumatizing for everyone. I was having a complete meltdown, and because I couldn't wear clothes, my boyfriend was the only one who could be in the bathroom with me. My dad had to pick me up early, and I sat in his truck covered only by a large towel. I got home and took a cold oatmeal bath, not knowing that cold can make it worse. I was screaming and running up and down my parents' hallway naked because it was genuinely driving me insane. I felt like I was losing my mind. Luckily, my mom reacted quickly. She sprayed me head to toe with a numbing spray she used for her shoulder injury, and everything finally settled. I slept for the rest of that day and the next, with her coming periodically to spray me again. It was the most mortifying and excruciating experience I've had to date. I have been ghostly pale since because I refuse to risk it happening again. Wear sunscreen. Protect your skin from the sun. You do not want to be me running around but naked in front of anybody, let alone your parents. Story 85. I suffered full-thickness burns to my torso and arm. I was in the burn unit and the plastic surgery unit for a short time. I remember begging for painkillers. The paramedics kept administering fentanyl. They had to give another dose every few minutes. They drove me past local hospitals directly to the burn unit at a university hospital about an hour from home. The handover was difficult. The paramedics had no more pain medication, so I had to wait until I was assigned a room to receive further pain management. I believe I passed out around that point. I came to in a very small hospital room with at least 5 people around me, and at that point I was being properly medicated. The pain continued for some time. In the hospital, I was given a patient-controlled analgesia pump, a device the patient operates to dispense pain medication that only releases a limited amount at set intervals. I remember staring at the pump, waiting for the timer to count down so I could get some relief. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.